rumeur internationale qui l'accusait de folie, pour rétorquer que, eh bien oui, je suis excentrique, je suis fou, je ne suis pas comme vous. Et vous allez voir ce que vous allez voir.
Eccentric and ambitious. Gaddafi tried to form a pan-Arab state with Egypt and Syria and even Tunisia, with himself in charge. His pretensions to leadership ended in a falling out with the other Arab states. Libya didn't even take part in their next war against Israel. It too ended in defeat, finally putting an end to the dream of Arab unity. Then came news that sent a shockwave through Libya. Egypt, under President Sadat, Nasser's successor, made a separate peace with Israel. And it did so with backing from Washington. This time, Gaddafi swapped his military uniform for the mufti favored by Palestinian guerrillas.
Can you present a real alternative to Sadat here?
Why speak also about Sadat? Who is Sadat? We speak about the Arab rights and the Palestinian people, how to restore his land, how to establish his state on his land, how to liberate their country.
Disappointed and rejected by the Arab states, Gaddafi had found a new cause. In Tripoli, he welcomed Yasser Arafat of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and leaders of the PFLP, the spearhead of Palestinian terrorism. From then on, he used his enormous resources to fund armed struggle.
If you take perhaps the most deadly of all the Palestinian groups at that time, the Abu Nidal organization was established in Libya. And Gaddafi had made a habit of supporting or appearing to support terrorist groups from all over the world. Particular interest to Britain, of course, was the IRA, the Irish Republican Army.
We had satellite photos of training camps in Libya. And these were not military training, they were guerrilla training people how to go around blowing up things and that sort of thing.
For 10 years, Gaddafi sponsored some 30 terrorist groups, ranging from Germany's Red Army faction to Carlos the Jackal. They struck Western targets accused of supporting Israel. Gaddafi also had the dubious distinction of being the first head of state to send agents to the West to assassinate his enemies.
We lived all in fear at that time. We had to be very careful who we meet, who we talk to. Sometimes we have even to use nicknames. So we had to be very, very careful because it was a dangerous time.
When we used to say to the Libyan diplomats in London or to our Libyan contacts, how do you justify this? What are you doing? How can you be carrying out these acts? Their attitude was, this is not terrorism. We are punishing some Libyan criminals. We're doing it. If they're in Libya, we do it in Libya. If they're in Britain, we do it in Britain. But you needn't worry about it. It's nothing to do with you because we're not going to hurt any British people. It's just Libyans that we're hurting.
In April 1984, Libyans firing from an upper window of their embassy in London wounded several anti-Gaddafi demonstrators and killed a young policewoman, Yvonne Fletcher. The British government, conscious of its oil interests in Libya, limited its response to expelling the embassy staff and breaking off diplomatic relations. But to the Libyans, even this muted response went too far.
And I saw somebody quite senior in the foreign ministry, and I said, my instructions are to tell you that you are no longer welcome in London. And as we had expected, they immediately retaliated, if you like, by saying that we had to leave within the same time. They weren't expecting it. They thought that Libyan interests were so important to Britain that we would not break off relations. And they were really surprised and upset and unhappy that we did.
Colonel, have you ever encouraged your men to kill your opponents overseas?
The Libyan people will follow these terrorists everywhere, and they have the right to eliminate them.
If Gaddafi now felt untouchable, it was because he had a powerful protector who showered him with honors on every visit. Since the end of the 1970s, he had been an ally of the Soviet Union, which sent him weapons and thousands of military advisors. On the chessboard of the Cold War, Libya and its terrorist networks made useful pawns to strike at the West. Terrorist violence reached a bloody climax in December 1985. Gaddafi's protege, the Abu Nidal organization, machine-gunned the El Al ticket counters in Vienna and Rome. Libyan intelligence was accused of supplying the weapons. Among the 20 dead were several US citizens, some of them children.
الإرهاب بكل أشكاله، ولكن أنا أرفض رفض قاطع أن يتهم العمل الفلسطيني بأنه إرهاب. أن العمل الفلسطيني هو أقدس عمل على الكرة الأرضية في هذا العصر.
The Rome and Vienna murders are only the latest in a series of brutal terrorist acts committed with Gaddafi's backing. Gaddafi called them heroic actions. I call them criminal outrages by an outlaw regime.
In Washington, Gaddafi had a new adversary, Ronald Reagan, a conservative Republican who had promised to crush America's enemies. Tripoli made an easier target than Moscow. Reagan sent the US 6th Fleet to the Libyan coast and shot down several Libyan aircraft. But it would take more than that to make Gaddafi back down. 100 miles from the American fleet, he was inspecting his tiny navy. It was indeed better suited to photo opportunities than to battle.
They tried to scare us. عموما نحن لا نخاف، وإذا كانوا يلعبوا فمعنى هذا أكدوا أن الكلام الذي قلناه وأن ريغان يلعب بالنار. وإذا كانوا جادين فنحن جادين.
It was all a charade. The Libyans knew that the United States would be reluctant to attack an ally of Moscow. In any case, the Americans themselves still held major oil interests in Libya. Gaddafi's ambitions won him more and more enemies. In Africa, he had threatened his southern neighbor, Chad, for several years. The Libyan army annexed northern Chad and built bases and airfields there. Gaddafi now confronted France, which backed the Chadian government. The crisis deepened. President Mitterrand sent a high-level negotiator.
Il m'a dit, vous savez, on vient me solliciter. Il y a quelques semaines, j'ai reçu des élus corses qui sont venus me demander des armes. J'ai refusé. Il alimentait la conversation sous l'angle, vous voyez, je fais des gestes pour la France parce que c'est la France socialiste. C'était ça, son idée. Il essayait de mettre un coin entre les Américains et nous, sous le prétexte que nous étions socialistes, donc, croyait-il, anti-américains, ce qui n'était pas le cas. Mitterrand m'avait autorisé à emporter des photos que nous avions prises, que notre aviation avait prises, des pistes qu'ils allongeaient. Car tout en discutant avec nous, il faisait allonger ces pistes. Et quand je lui suis arrivé, je lui ai dit, mais c'est pas loyal. Je suis sorti de ma scène, je lui ai dit, voilà les photos qui ont été prises tel jour. Alors, il a quand même été comme ça. Et il m'a dit, il les a regardés, et puis il les a retournés, il y avait une date, il m'a dit, ah, je croyais que c'était des photos américaines. J'ai dit non, ce ne sont pas des photos américaines, ce sont des photos françaises. Alors il a regardé la date de nouveau. Il m'a dit tel jour. Ah oui, en effet. Il était très comédien. En effet, j'étais sur place dans le train et je me souviens, il y a des avions qui passaient au-dessus. C'était probablement vos photos. Oui, très bien, mais j'accepte de discuter sur ces documents. Alors il réfléchit. Et si je ne les arrête pas, qu'est-ce que